All right, folks, it's time for us to begin our class this morning. Thank all of you for being here, and especially those that may be online with us this morning. We appreciate that so much. And if you are online with us, we'll be doing chapter 50 of Genesis today. That's the last chapter in the book. And if we can manage it, we plan on finishing today, and we'll be doing some other material a little bit later. We're going back in the New Testament is what we'll be doing, but we'll be in chapter 50 today. Again, what we try to do, especially for those at home, we try to go over our bulletin best we can, try to remind everyone of things that may be going on and illnesses and so forth like that. But if you don't mind, let's do that. Our homebound members, we always try to remember them. If we were able to ask each one of them, what's the one thing that if you could do health-wise that you could do, more than likely they would say they'd like to be at church. They'd like to be with their church family. So let's remember that. But anyway, they are Brenda Baxter, Jerry Koss, Barbara Fields, Johnny Garrison, Billy Glenn, Joanne King, Joe Latham, Faye Latham, Brandon Ligon, Jean Odom, Darlene Pugh, Gracie Rushing, Marilyn Sanders, LaBelle Stiers, Jimmy Sullivan, Jackie Swift, Dan Whitstone, and James Whitson are those. Please remember this Sunday, this is the first Sunday of the month. This is the second. There will be 5 Sundays this month. And in that, what we've been doing is that we have a short devotional period. Then we learn some new songs that we can help to enhance our worship better, and it'll be starting at 5 o'clock this afternoon here. As far as the campus ministry, this Sunday night at 7 at the campus house, there'll be a service there led by the students. They'll be going to April 14th, going to Top Golf, and then a banquet at April 21st, because for too long after that, school's out, right there 1st of May. And they have some other things there. So please remember that. And there is, we'd like to congratulate Trip Scarvey. Trip was baptized yesterday by his grandfather, and be sure to give him a hug and let him know how happy we are for him. Also, under our prayer request, this coming Tuesday, I'll be having knee surgery, scoping, and I'll be on crutches for a little while. I don't know how long. I'm going to see if they can hook a fishing rod on the side of it. I'm not sure. There's bound to be some way I can figure that out. But I've got some surgery there to appreciate the prayers for that. Lorraine Buchanan had knee surgery Wednesday and is being released from the hospital and is staying with her granddaughter. Billy Glenn is still dealing with multiple health issues. Judy Richardson fell this past Tuesday and broke her hip. Surgery went well. She's still at UAB in Birmingham, Carrie was telling us, and so it may be a few more days before she leaves there. And I feel sure we'll be having her a rehab down here at Aspire. That's where she was sometime last year about some medical issues. Marilyn Sanders will have a nerve block this week. Randy Swift is still undergoing treatment for prostate cancer, and as far as we know, he and Jackie are still in Arizona, best I know. James Barger had a large cancerous tumor removed and will begin treatment soon. Mary Ellison is under hospice care in Childersburg. Jimmy Harden has started chemo and is doing well. Johnny Johnson is home, continuing to recover. And you can there's a phone number there. It said he would love to have phone calls, so hopefully maybe you can give him a call. Tim King is receiving treatments for liver and lung cancer, and there is his P.O. box in Coker. Jesse Parham is receiving treatments for stomach cancer, and Eva Redmill is home after receiving a stent. She had to go in and have that arteriogram thing, and she wound up with a stent. Dale Reeves is under hospice care. Shane Reeves is struggling with advanced cancer at this time, and Camille Winkler is under treatment for cancer at this time. if you would be interested in this, under news and notes today, immediately following our morning service, there'll be an egg hunt and picnic, and it is not just for parents with children, even though that's probably the majority. Anyone is welcome to come and enjoy that company time with them. And our last leaders group will be leaving this coming Thursday and Friday, going up to Nashville at the convention. I know I've said this probably before. It is something to see up there. I don't know, but 2 to 3, maybe 4,000 children, not counting parents and so forth like that. So, and then to go into those big auditoriums they have and have everyone in there to have singing and so forth is very uplifting. April the 16th, we will be honoring Blake and Jordan Scott with a baby shower, and there's the time at 3 p.m. in the annex. And they are registered at Amazon, Target, and Buy Baby Buy. Wonder why they have 2 buys on baby title there. Because if they're grandparents, they're going to buy more than they need, probably. Spring is a time for weddings and showers. Join us April 23rd in Annex at 3 p.m. for a bridal shower for Riley Chandler. Riley is one of our college students, and she's going to be graduating, and she'll be getting married soon. And so, please, a very sweet young lady, always faithful in coming. So, she's from Mississippi. So, I know they would appreciate us all taking part in that. And then they have some other things there about diaper drop-off there. As far as our birthdays on the backside, we have this. We have several. Bo was born on, yesterday was his birthday. David Williams, I don't know if David's here today. I'll say happy birthday to you for your son. How's that sound? And David Williams, Paul Michael Marlowe is on the 4th. On the 5th, Evan Patterson and Peggy Sellers. On the 6th is Johnny Baxter. The 7th, Don Terry. And on the 8th is Rick Estes. If you don't know Rick, he would be standing at the back door letting you in. Probably he does. He's very, very regular with doing that, so we appreciate that. Any other announcements about any sickness or anything, anybody? If not, let's bow and we'll have a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much for all the blessings of life, the wonderful day we have out. The yesterday, even though it was windy, it was still a beautiful day. And to look out up into trees and see the new leaves that are coming on them, see the flowers coming, blooming out in the woods and around our homes and so forth, just to let us know that these things that you have put here, I've always felt as a reminder for us to know that you are God, that you take care of us, and that you care for us. And we thank you so much for that. Be with those that we went over on our sick list and help each one to be as well as possible. Take care of them. Pray that procedures that may be going for them, that there'll be those that will help them to be healthy. Those that have already had procedures, we pray that you will bless them during their recovery. Those that may be taking treatments over long term, please help them to have as beneficial time with that to where they can get their health back. Father, we're always mindful, too, of the fact of our brothers and sisters around the world. We want to remember them. We'll have a mission trip leaving in June, and we pray that you will bless that trip and help everyone to stay safe and well, and that much good can be done for your cause there. Please be with our country. Help us to be a better people to each other. Pray that we'll have patience with each other and can care and love for each other the way that Jesus did for us and for the people in his time. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. We are in chapter 50, as we said, and this deals with the death of Israel. Now, even though he dies in chapter 49, right at the very end, on verse 33 of 49, it says, when Jacob finished charging his sons, he blessed his sons and telling them what they would, the blessings that they would have, all 12 of them. He drew his feet into bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. And of course, we know what he told Joseph beforehand, even had Joseph to swear to do this, was to take his body back to Canaan, to where he would be buried among his people. And a matter of fact, we'll see that very same phrase basically mentioned in chapter 50 about Joseph. So we want to see that there. So let's look again. Now I do have some spare lessons. If anybody wants them, you're welcome to have them. It's chapter 49 and 50 is what I have, but the lessons have the same questions that we have up here. And so it says here, what did Jacob do? What did Joseph do when Jacob died? And the answer to that is found in verse 1. We read this over last week, so I decided not to read it today. I'm hoping we can get through today. But it says there that then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Again, showing the affection that he had for his father. If we look back, let me just go back just for a moment in chapter 37. In chapter 37, and we'll see this shortly, hold true God's prophecy to Joseph through the dreams that he had about what was going to happen in his life and his family, the relationship between him and his family. And it would be the fact that they will bow down to him. But in verse 3 of chapter 37, it says this, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons." As we mentioned when we went over that, if you'd put a period right there, that's still not a good thing among other sons. I believe we all could understand how that could cause hard feelings against people. But it says this, because he was the son of his old age. And it said there he made him what we call a coat of many colors, is what you may hear people say today. So, and also in that very chapter is where Joseph talks to his brothers and his father about the dreams that he had. One of them was about the sheaves of wheat, and then to his father, he had a dream about the sun, the stars, and the moon, and so forth about them. So if you do want to go back and look at some of this stuff in this chapter, you can see that. So it's not unusual then to know that he basically, even though his father had just passed, he was showing affection to his father and missing him at that particular time. What did Joseph tell his servants, the physicians, to do? Now his servants, some of his servants were physicians. There would have been some that would have been those that took care of his home and so forth like that, because we need to remember something. Joseph was the second most powerful person in Egypt. Only one more powerful was Pharaoh. And so he was very powerful, would have been very rich, and people would have done anything that they could do to take care of any wishes that he may have. And so what did he tell his servants to do? To embalm his father. Now, this was thousands of years ago. Now, probably around 4,000 or so years ago, that this was told to them. And so, and again, I mentioned probably a little bit last week, but if you've ever looked at the History Channel or anything like that, or you probably know, I've heard of the facts, that the Egyptian people, even in that time, had already learned how to do embalming. And it was, my understanding, it was a way to where that person that would be, their understanding of the afterlife is this, is that person would go there to that afterlife. And that's why you would see many treasures in their tombs. And sadly, that's how a lot of the tombs was robbed. There's in that part of the world through the years. So anyway, his physicians was told to embalm his father. So that was a medical procedure that they already had learned to do. Don't know when and how. I never tried to look that up. How long did it take to embalm Jacob? Now, Jacob is also known, as we know, as Israel. But how long did it take? And it said 40 days. If you look in verse 3, it says, now 40 days were required, or another word for required there in my New American Standard is fulfilled for it, for such is the period required for embalming. And so, isn't that interesting to hear about that in the Scriptures, that it was put in exactly how long it took to do that? And so anyway, it's 40 days. How long did the Egyptians weep for Jacob? Now, we need to look at just for a moment. The answer is 70 days. But remember this, Joseph was there as a slave. He was bought by Potiphar, was in his house, was accused, was put in prison. Then he was able to interpret dreams to Pharaoh, and then he was brought out, and then he was put in charge of basically everything in Egypt. And so we had that. But then Jacob came down. He was there for quite a few years. I'm sorry right now, I didn't stop and check, but I think it's close to 20 years, 15 to 20 years, I believe it was, that Jacob was in Egypt before he died. And so there was a number of years. We even have in here where he talked to Pharaoh and blessed him. And so there was even a relationship there. So there's no doubt that Jacob, his people, he brought 70 people, I believe it was, to Egypt with him, and they would grow during this 15, 20-year period and would become a great nation is what they would become before it's over with. And so there was no doubt that they had become relationships of family, so to speak, in there. And we see there that the Egyptians, who were not followers of God in the fact of worshiping Jehovah, they were more of idolatry worshiping is what they were. You can look and see that in a lot of their inscriptions and so forth like that. After the last of mourning had passed, what did Joseph do? Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh. Now, as you notice, it says, after the last of mourning had passed. So we know it was a set time. We saw that 70 days that they mourned for him. I don't know how that number came about in their time, but it was a standard thing undoubtedly that they did. And I would assume it'd be for anyone, but it would not probably be as big of a level of mourning as it would have been for Jacob when he passed. So Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh. Now, if you'll notice in verse 4, it says, and when the days of mourning for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, I don't know if I have that or not. Okay, this is what it is. This is what I was wanting to mention. What did he ask for from the household of Pharaoh? It says this, for now, if now I have found Pharaoh in your sight, please favor in your sight, please speak to Pharaoh. So he had his own home over here. He went to the home or palace, whatever it was called at that time, for Pharaoh, and he talked to those people that took care of his house, and he said this, and whoever else it would have been. It would have been whoever was like the one that would be with the Pharaoh all the time, and the things would be brought back and forth through that person. But now it says, if I have found favor in your sight, please speak to Pharaoh. Now, isn't that a strange thing for him to say? What I mean by that is this. What did he do for them? If you stop and think about it, what did Joseph do for the nation of Egypt? And it's this. He saved them through God. What I mean by that is God told Joseph what was going to happen, and they they listened to him, and they prepared for that, and their nation was spared. Now, what I mean by spared, they got to stay as they were. Matter of fact, Pharaoh became more powerful during this time because the people had to sell, they had to give all their money for food, all their animals, their houses for food, and finally themselves. And they sold themselves basically to Pharaoh for food. And so he became actually more powerful. So you could see, to me this is a strange thing, that if I have found favor in your sight, don't you think he had favor in the sight of all those people? Because they really, their life depended on what he told them, and then he saw that it was done. So I thought that was unusual, or a particular thing that got my attention there. You know the answer. He definitely found favor. And what did he ask for? This. Now therefore, in verse 5, if you'll notice, now he's still going to ask them to speak to Pharaoh, saying, in verse 5 is what he wants them to tell Pharaoh. And it says this. It says, behold, my father made me swear, saying, behold, I'm about to die. In my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me, is what it was. So what did Joseph ask for is this. Now therefore, please let me go up and bury my father, then I will return. So he had no plans of staying in Canaan. Now the famine would have already been over with by the time he died. And so we see that, don't know what Canaan would have looked like, but look at what he had amassed, have wealth-wise in Egypt. And so he asked a simple thing, doesn't he? I'd appreciate it if I can go and bury my father. I know there's several of us in here that's actually probably had to ask that same request if you were still had a job working, to where you would need to go in and talk to those that you work for and tell them that you have had a family member to pass and you need to go to the funeral, what we would say today. So it's not an unusual request, is what it is. What was Pharaoh's answer to his request? Go up and bury your father as he made you swear. And so even the word swear back then was a different thing than what it might be today. What I mean by that is this. It was something, it was more than just a promise. You may tell somebody, I'll see you, I'll meet you at so-and-so at 1 o'clock today. All right? Well, when you say something like that, then that other person that hears it expects you to what? Be there at 1 o'clock. Isn't that true? That's true. And so it's not unusual to, now, if a person may say, now you may hear somebody say this, if God wills, I will. You may hear somebody say that sometimes. But it's not unusual to have somebody to, in this case, make more than just a request. This was a very important thing. And in their time, if you remember, you would put the hand under their thigh, is what you would do, to make it even more, in a sense, guaranteed that you will do what I ask you to do. And so we see that. So it's good that even Pharaoh knew about promising, swearing to someone that I will do anything in my power to make sure that I will carry out your request. So that's what it is there. In verse 7, who went with Joseph to bury his father? Now, I don't know about you, but I found this somewhat unusual. There went all the servants of Pharaoh. Have no idea how many that is. The elders of his household, even. And all the elders of the land of Egypt. So there undoubtedly was a very large caravan, what they probably would have called it that time, going from Egypt to Canaan. And in that request, there would be embalmed Israel. Would have been, we'll see very likely by how we find out that Joseph is taken care of, that there was no doubt that there would be a coffin that Jacob would be put in and would be carried. The embalmed body would be carried to Canaan. And so a very large group of people. Now, isn't it interesting to see that in this was Pharaoh's people. This is not the other family. That's not Joseph's family. That's just the Pharaoh's family. So no doubt, again, how much they respected Joseph for what he did for them in that country. Who from Joseph's family went? All the household of Joseph and his brothers and his father's household. So again, another large group of people at that time. You know, they've been there several years. They have multiplied in size and so forth like that. So you would also have a large group. It would have been interesting probably to see how long of a caravan or a long group of people it would have been that's going for a funeral for one person. So that's what they're doing there. So not only does Pharaoh's people go, but Jacob's people go too. Who did Joseph leave in Egypt as they went to Canaan? Well, they did leave some. The scriptures tell us in verse 8. They left only their little ones and their flocks and their herds in the land of Goshen. That's where they were. That's where Joseph, that's where his father, their people were in that general area. Of course, they would have had to leave some grown-ups to be the ones that would take care of all this. So there would have been some of them. But we do know then the vast majority of the people from both Pharaoh's family and also Israel's family then went up. Who else went with him? In verse 9, both chariots and horsemen. And it was a very great company. Now, chariots, I know we've probably seen movies where they have been on TV, and you may have actually seen pictures of some of the old, every now and then there might be some of them found. But the point is, here is something that had wheels on it and horse-drawn and so forth like that. Not everyone would have had access to a chariot. It would have been the elite of those people at that time. The Pharaoh, his people, and so forth like that. And horsemen, there's no doubt there would have been men riding horses, however many it would have been. We'll just say 100. I don't know. That's just a guess. But that group would also be going with them. And it is described as a very great company. Now, as we know, that part of the world is not very often wet. So very likely, someone that might be toward Canaan looking toward Egypt, and all of a sudden they see probably clouds of dust, probably great clouds of dust coming. And there's no doubt that would have been one of the scenes that they would have seen. And then to make that large amount of dust that would have been produced by the animals and people and so forth, when they saw them, they probably was wondering, wow, there's a lot of people coming this way. What did they come to do? In verse 10, it says this, and when they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, is what they did. So they came to this area, which is beyond the Jordan River. And if you notice, the Jordan River ties the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. And so, but they were, it was beyond the Jordan from the side they were coming. Sounds like very likely that they probably were coming from what I would call the east side and going across. I don't know, but that's what I think it would be. And so they were coming for that. What did they do there? They lamented there with a very great and sorrowful lamentation. You know, one thing we hadn't thought about much, this great group of people going would not have been a joyous time. It would have been a time of sadness. I'm assuming that Joseph and his family perhaps would have been in front. I don't know how they would have done that. I really don't. Or they may have had the Pharaoh and his horsemen's people and all that stuff in front. I just don't know. But it would have been a time for great sorrow. Now, usually when you know of something very sad, then that means that that person was greatly thought of. There's no doubt that he meant a lot. In this case, Jacob meant a lot to the people there. And so we see that great lamentation that they are having for him. How long did they stay? 7 days. They stayed 7 days. I've always been somewhat fascinated with numbers in the Bible. I know I've probably mentioned this before, but here's just another example of it. In this very chapter, we've seen 40 days, and now 7 days. And so we'll see some more of that before it's over with. So it's just interesting to see how often numbers, you know, there was a Godhead of 3, 12 apostles, and then 2 more, and things such as that throughout the Scriptures. So they stayed there that many days doing that lamenting. Who were the inhabitants of the land? The Canaanites. So they came from Egypt, had crossed the Jordan, and then they were in the land of Canaan. And so when they got there, they they no doubt tented up there to where people could stay there. And then for that amount of time, they lamented all that. And the inhabitants of the land were the Canaanites. That was the people that land is where Joseph came. Where Jacob came from. So there they are in that land. Once they saw the mourning for Jacob, what did they say? And after seeing this, seeing the group, seeing the 7 days of mourning, this is what they said in verse 11. In verse 11 it says, Now when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous. Now that's also known as heavy, a sad, real sad thing. This is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians, And now, so they saw that, and you know, it might be understandable that they would have seen the Egyptians coming, and then the family of Israel coming too, and so they were all coming. That large group was coming from the country of the region of Egypt anyway, and so they definitely saw that they would have been grieving at that particular time. What was the name given for this place? It's this, Abel Mizra is how you pronounce that, the best I can understand, which is beyond the Jordan. So again, it's going to be in the land of Canaan. This place, Abel Mizra is the way it is pronounced there. So, and if we remember in the book of Genesis, at particular important places in geography, it's not unusual for them to be known as a particular name. So it's not unusual to have this right here at this place. What did his Jacob, what did his sons do? In verse 12, did for him as he had charged them. In verse 12, it says, and thus his sons did for him as he had charged them. And we'll see in the next verse there, 13, what that is. And which is this, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field for a burial site from Ephraim the Hittite. So they in verse 13 is they're actually the process of burying him there. Now, after Joseph buried his father, what did he do? he returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Now we remember Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob, all and their wives are buried in that cave. And now Joseph, true to his word, is now turning back and heading back to Egypt and taking all the family with him, taking the family of Israel back with him down there. As Joseph's brothers were talking among themselves, what did they say? Now, before I show you the answer, you may already see it, but we remember what they did in 37, 38 in there somewhere. You know, they took Joseph and put him in a pit and then sold him, what they did. So I guess it's not, we have to remember now, Jacob has died and now buried. Now that kind of, when that happens, that kind of ends that person's influence, legacy, whatever it might be. And so it's not unusual, because they thought this several times in the studies we've done. What if Joseph should bear a grudge against us and pay us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? Again, isn't that a very unusual thing to be thinking of? They still knew what they had done was so wrong to do against their brother that they have carried this thought with them all through their years. When they first found out he was who he was, they were worried about it, then that he going to kill us, and so forth like that, because of what we did to him. And again, I cannot not think about this. When he was in that pit, very likely, I don't know about you, but even if you're a several feet away from a pit or something other, you could still hear what other people were saying. During that time he was in the pit, his brothers were trying to decide whether or not to kill him. Well, he heard all this. And be honest with you, I doubt he forgot it. He probably remembered it. But you know what? As we know through the Scripture, even in this last chapter of the book, he holds no grudge against his brothers. And we'll see why. Sometimes we need to remember, when we feel as though we get a bowl of lemons, I know those saying make lemonade out of it, but like when we feel as though why am I being treated this way? Why is this happening to me? I try my best, Lord, to do the best I can and to live for you. And yet we still have some of these times. But in the grand scheme of things, after that goes by, we normally see the wisdom that God had for us. It normally makes us better people, whatever it may be. And we need to always try to remember that. So it's funny to me that they were thinking, uh-oh, Dad's gone. And since he's gone, what's our brother going to do? So let's see. What did Joseph's brothers send him? They sent him a message, kind of like sending something to somebody before. How about you go and tell so-and-so this? It might be something like that. So that's what happened there. Send him a message. The messenger that was sent to Joseph said what? This is what he said in verse 17. Please forgive, I beg you, the transgressions of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now, please forgive the transgressions of the servants of God of your father. Now, so the brothers themselves and even their families, please forgive all these people. There's no doubt that they had seen the power that Joseph had in Egypt. Joseph would have had power to where he could have told anyone to do this or do that, whatever it might be, however hideous it might have been, and they would have done it, just like that. But that was not Joseph. Joseph was not that type of person. And so, but it says here, when this person came up to him and said, please forgive, I beg you. That's more than just asking. That's just pleading, please forgive for your brothers for what they did to you and the sin against you. And so don't know why they didn't come, but they didn't. And then what did Joseph do when he heard the message? He wept when they spoke to him, is what he did. His brothers came to him and did what? Fell down before him. The dreams that he had in chapter 37 is now fulfilled. They did that more than just one time. And what did they say? Behold, we are your servants, is what they are. So his answer was, go about your rest of your days. I will take care of you and your families. So that's going to be the end of chapter 50. We appreciate it. Thank you for tolerating this time period. I know it's a long chapter and it took a long time to get there, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. So let's get ready for our worship service. Class is dismissed.